Hi there, welcome folks. Come on in. So we'll just wait another 15
I'm
seconds.
here.
Hi there, welcome Anira.
Thank you.
So we'll just get started in about 30 seconds. We're excited for this, last event of the year, last community event. Hopefully we'll get to interact with one another a little bit and really get to, the work that we want to do together, which is one of really healing. So as a few more folks are joining in, as they join in, let me share my screen so we can begin. And then my colleague here, Colleen, will let them in. And at any point, if you have any logistical questions, feel free to reach out to her. But yeah, let's begin. So welcome everyone. So today we're here to really talk about practicing skillful speaking and listening to imagine racial healing. So thank you all for signing up and for showing up. I'm really happy to see lots of new faces here. And again, today's topic is very fresh for many of us because, many of us for the holidays or the end of the year, we'll be going to see our families. And we're going to be talking about lots of things with them. So communication is going to be critical. So this will be an interactive session. So hopefully you will get to interact with one another, but also you all will interact with each other. But before we begin, I just want to say that I don't have all the answers. And we may not get healed today, in 45 minutes. But again, for us, it's the key word for me today is really one of imagining. So it's just a way for us to, an invitation for us to move into this conversation. If you feel comfortable, feel free to, turn on your camera, but do keep yourself on mute. We will have opportunities to interact. This way, I also feel like there are other people here, but however you're comfortable. With that said, let's actually begin. Welcome everyone. And for all of our programs or community events, I just love to begin with a short mindfulness exercise. So if you'll indulge me, I'm just going to invite you all to just come to a comfortable seated position or standing position, wherever you are in the world. And we're just going to be here for a few minutes. But, you can rest your hands on your lap or on your knees. And if you're comfortable, really bring your eyes to a gentle close. You could place your gaze at a stationary point in front of you if you don't want to close your eyes. But the whole idea here is really one of centering. And just take a few moments to arrive. We'll be talking about skillful speaking, skillful listening, imagination, racial healing, lots of things. So in this moment, just take a few seconds to notice what arises in the mind. Perhaps there's thinking, planning. Perhaps there are certain feelings or expectations. They're all welcome here. That's okay. But see if you can let go of those thoughts and emotions at this moment. And bring your awareness to your body. From the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. Really noticing any place in your body that may be holding, that may be tight. Really feeling a sense of release in those places. And then bringing your awareness, your attention to your breath. Noticing your in-breath and your out-breath, and really savoring it. Amidst a global pandemic, just expressing a little bit of gratitude that this breath is still with us. savoring this friend of yours that's been with you from the moment you were born. And then as we begin to come to a close, I'd just like to pose a question, and I'd love for you to notice what arises in your mind. What brought you here? Why did you sign up for this event? Again, without getting lost in the paralysis of analysis that our minds can often create, just observing gently the thoughts that come up. Just breathing with them, noticing them, bringing them to awareness. And then slowly letting them go too. And then after your next exhale, you can bring your chin to your chest, stretching the back of your neck. And if your eyes were closed, you can open them and come back to awareness. Welcome back, everyone. If you're comfortable, please do turn your cameras on so I can see who else is here. For those of you that have just joined, welcome. Welcome, Janet, Geraldine, Calway, Ekta, and others. So we like to begin all our programs with just a centering exercise in this way. It's not only good for our nervous systems, of course, mindfulness has been shown to also, break bias, to really help us overcome conscious and unconscious biases. So this is really the backbone of our work. So what I'd like to do is, I'd love for you all to share with us, a little bit about yourself so we can get to know one another. So really like your name, your location, and then what brought you here, that reflection we just did towards the end of that exercise. I can begin, my name is Anu, I'm in New York City. And what brought me here was to really share what I've learned around this concept of skillful speaking and listening. So yeah, I would love to hear and read what you all, where you all are, but also what brought you here today. That way you can also get to know one another. So please take a moment. Anita is in Buffalo and just wanted to be still. Wonderful. Welcome, Anita. Other folks, maybe a few others, and then of course you can continue to chat throughout our time together. Brandy in Minnesota, I'm here to learn skills to better myself. Erin from Vancouver, I'm hoping to get better at these kinds of conversations with the youth I work with. Wonderful. That's great. KG joining from Denver. The collective healing part stood out for me, so wanted to join to learn to be better and share the learning with our team. That's fabulous. Nicola, they're an elementary vice principal in Hamilton, Canada. I need to learn skills to support staff and students. Great. Great. Chiara Sorio from New York City. Oh, yay. I'm also here. I wanted to learn how to improve in communication. Jermaine in Massachusetts, continue the healing journey. Then we have Tamiko in Atlanta. Learn to be better me. That's great. Well, hopefully we'll get to all of these things. And it's so great to see people across the continent, connecting in this way here around this topic. So because this will be interactive, I just wanted to share some shared agreements. After working with now over 50,000 professionals, across the globe, we found these shared agreements to be really supportive in learning and listening and discussions, particularly to keep our container safe and one that is free of shame. So, of course, we're all going to try our best to do it. But if at any point, we kind of move away from that, I'll just provide a gentle reminder to go back to these shared agreements for us. The first one being really using I statements. So when we talk within our small group or in this larger group, and this is really important because for us, we really want to own our experience of, DEI in general. The second being commitment to dialogue. And, this is based on Brene Brown's research. We really love the dual commitment of understanding, which is giving one another and oneself benefit of the doubt, and the other of compassion. So just, but this is why you're here. This is why you signed up for this, but just to remind ourselves and ground ourselves in that intention. Third being staying present. This topic of DEI, of bias, brings us to so many memories in the past, projections into the future. That's okay. But just being present to here we are, sitting or standing in front of a screen, somewhere in the world, connecting with these humans. So that's just a quick, gentle reminder. Investigate discomfort. This is really important because discomfort is the core of this work. And this is where we begin to learn the semantics of advancing this work and doing this work more effectively. And lastly, privacy and confidentiality. The hope is that everything you learn here leaves here. But if there's something that someone shares that's sensitive and personal, please let's keep that confidential. So with that, could we all agree with that? Could we jump in? Great. I see some smiles here. Welcome, Johan and Frank. Welcome from Montreal. And for sharing while you're here. That's great. So great. I'd love for us to do one other reflection as we move on, as we jump into this topic of skillful communication, skillful speaking and listening. What is skillful communication to you? If you were to pause and go back, once again, in that space of presence, what is skillful communication? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. This is really to you. But just to get us started around this topic. Aaron shared listening as much as talking. Wonderful. Johan, communication that is audience focused. Great. What else? These are great because this is something that is so important to us, particularly as we move into the holiday season, as the end of the year, but also in general, as human beings. One of the things that was really hard for us during the pandemic, or has been and continues to be, is the fact that we can't communicate, in person with so many people. Anita shared listening, Nicola understanding context, understanding the needs of your audience. Great. These are great. So please continue to keep them coming, because we'll delve deeper into all of these issues. And for me, this is kind of an anonymous quote that I've built off of Jim Rohn, who's like a pretty famous motivational speaker. And as I think about communication, which is the key word in skillful communication is based on 20% what you know and 80% how you feel about what you know. So I'm going to read that again. Based on 20% what you know and 80% how you feel about what you know. So this is kind of, as we delve deeper into skillful communication, we're getting into the root of these challenges. And I want to kind of begin with just sharing my journey around this, and then breaking you up to really talk about your own journeys around racial healing, and then giving you some context for skillful speaking and communication. So, my journey really began with advocacy. I was trained as a scientist, as an attorney, and I worked as a human rights activist, around the world. And then, of course, coming back to the US as a lawyer on the front lines of, racial justice and thinking about mass incarceration and issues of racial disparities across the board. And I kept on seeing that the language I was using in speaking about the work I was doing, in interacting with people, wasn't getting me the results that I wanted to have, which was, again, to advance equity, to advance justice. Rather, we're basically collecting a lot of information. So as a human rights lawyer, what most of us really do is investigate violations and write very long reports about them. And yet we've done that for 60 years, and the state of disparities in our nation hasn't changed. So what's going on, right? What's going on? And that's what really kind of led me into thinking about, well, what is happening here? We're writing a lot, speaking a lot, doing a lot of research, but we're not effective in actually making change happen. So I kind of broke down communication into two aspects. Many of you have already alluded to it, speaking and listening. So there's a famous quote, that I heard in the African American church, but it could be more broadly. It's a proverb that said there's a reason why God or nature or evolution, gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So like someone already shared that in the chat, that listening piece is so important in communication. And then my journey to skillful communication really began there. And I took a bunch of courses on nonviolent communication and really beginning to understand, well, how do we actually become effective communicators? How do people negotiate peace deals? How do people get out of these massively violent situations? One classic example that I think of is what happened in South Africa after there was a transition that was happening from apartheid into a peaceful democratic country. So the horrors of what was apartheid could have led to a civil war, like the ones we've seen in East Timor or Ethiopia and other places in the world. But what was different? And, in the classes themselves, as I was learning about it, was like, oh, it was communication amongst the leaders. And this is where I began to lean into the 80% of how I feel about what I know as I was listening to what was being said. And within that feeling, I started beginning to uncover a lot of discomfort, lots of body sensations, lots of memories, lots of associations that were uncomfortable. This was a terrain of feelings. And this was keeping me in a place of reactivity when I would be using my voice. So really kind of thinking about, where do I have control? And this is what I'll talk about moving forward in terms of skillful communication. This isn't effective communication. This isn't optimal communication. This isn't the perfect communication. There's nothing you should need or one should need. It is skillful, which is about getting our point across. And as I think about where do I have control, it's really around my thoughts, emotions, words, and actions. So kind of beginning to observe that with mindfulness. And then this becomes really a central competency in advancing diversity, equity, inclusion in our workplaces and also in our communities, because it bridges the gap of what I feel, and I'll share a little bit about this, between how we want the world to be, right, to how we feel about the world. So this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. So I want us to practice this actually together before really talking about each of these components. So what I'd like for all of us to do, and we'll do this in a minute, is really share with one another, what does racial healing mean to you? And then what that means is, what does it feel like? What does it look like? Just like unprompted. So we'll break up into groups of dyads, groups of 2, and maybe 1 or 2, 3 groups of 3 based on the numbers. And you'll be with one another for about 5 minutes. So again, each person sharing for about 2 minutes each. And as one is speaking, really being present to this idea of listening, what that means for you. And also as you're speaking, noticing what's happening in your body as you're sharing. So the prompt again is, what does racial healing mean to you? And as we move into these smaller groups, please introduce your name and your location. So we can go from there. So that's great, Zetwik. I hope you could use the chat function to do that with your partner. Otherwise, you're welcome to stay here too, in the main room. So you should receive an invite momentarily to go into these groups, and then we'll bring you back in 5 minutes. So see you soon. So good to see you back here. So let me actually share my screen just to reintroduce the topic. So again, the question that I really posed was, noticing you're speaking and listening, but what does racial healing mean to you? Using the shared agreements, of course, as the backbone. So I'd like to actually invite some of you to share what that was like, and particularly focusing on this idea of skillful listening. What did you notice in your body as you were listening? What did you notice in your mind And if you don't remember, perhaps reflect on that now. Where was it going for you and what came up? So I'll stop sharing here, but would love to invite one or two reflections here. And you can also use the chat function. You can message me if you want to just privately send me something. But again, like part of the work around this is really talking about it. One of the things around racial healing is we don't discuss it enough, right? It's something that we deeply desire, but what does it look like? What does it feel like? So, anyone? That's great, Geraldine. That's wonderful. It's a great observation. It was hard to listen without interrupting. If you're able, I'd love to learn more. You know, as you reflect on that experience, why was it difficult to not interrupt? And you're welcome to use the chat function, or you can unmute yourself.
Okay, it was hard because he was saying something that was very personal, and I wanted to stop him and say and reflect on it or comment on it without having heard all that he had to say. So I intentionally just said, no, I just need to listen to what he has to say.
Yeah.
And then I thought about what he said. And then when it was my turn, then I kind of talked to him about some of the things that he raised.
That's great. You know, and as you begin to be in this practice of skillful listening, I don't know if this is true for you, but what I found in my experience is that in that moment where you want to interrupt or speak as you're listening, something in you was triggered, something in you was stirred up, right? So,
right. Yeah, definitely.
You know, and part of the journey here is to then, oh, can I observe what's being stirred up without needing to react, which you did,
Yes.
right? You pursed your lips. Again,
it was hard, but I did.
exactly. Exactly. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Anita shared, we had a nice conversation between us. I feel like it was welcoming and comfortable dialogue. Wonderful. I focused on my answer and how to curate it instead of starting the conversation by listening or asking questions. That's a really wonderful observation, Nicola, because part of it is like, I'm sensing, reading this between the lines, there was something known as impression management that was going on, because he used the word curated it. So like there was already like this idea that you wanted to present something in a certain way, which is oftentimes what a lot of us have to do, particularly in a workplace setting. So it's good to note that, but because sometimes that compromises authenticity. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that, Nicola, a little bit.
Yeah, it's really wonderful to have the language for that. I've never heard of that expression before, impression management. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely, you know, it's like a perfectionist trait in some ways that I think a lot of us have, that we feel like we have to, yeah, instead it's decentering ourselves, right? I think, and I intuitively, I'm still working on that, trying to step back and just stop and not try and have answers. And I'm in a job where we're expected to have answers all the time. And I think I'm always encouraged to lead from the front, and I actually fundamentally disagree. And I think we need to do more leading from the middle, but I haven't been brought up to know how to do that. So this is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nicola. And the funny thing is, very few of us have been brought up to do that. So we're really in practice together. And if you think about this work of DEI, of breaking bias, you know, there are a gazillion books that have been written upon on this topic, so much research around inequality and justice, a lot of this thought stuff, right? Rational mind stuff. And yet the state of the world is where it is, despite all of the stuff we know. So, you know, for me, like, we're not going to think our way out of these challenges, which is why we need folks like you to be courageous, to get out of, you know, thinking from our front, but moving more into our middle. And that is the leaning into discomfort, that emotional piece that I was sharing with you earlier. Let me actually share my screen and kind of now get to the grips of, well, what is skillful communication? So we can have a deeper discussion around this. So like, as I think about and study this phenomenon of communication, communication has these two components, speaking and listening. And of course, oftentimes there's a purpose to communication, which is to get our point across, to negotiate, to do something, to bring something to life and action. Now, skillful communication is really based on, where do I have control? So again, as Nicola, you were sharing, it's really about, this is what I have control over. My body, my mind, my thoughts, my emotions. I may not have control over certain things, right? Sometimes I just feel a certain way, but what I could do is I could feel them, right? Thoughts just arise sometimes. There's a proliferation of thoughts. What I could do is observe them as opposed to react to them. And what helps around this, skillful speaking is really asking oneself, is what you are speaking, is what I am speaking truthful? There's 4 components to it: useful, timely, and kind. So these 4 components really make something skillful speaking: truthful, useful, timely, and kind. And as I began to practice this in my own life, particularly around the activism and advocacy I was doing, I was like, oh my gosh, things are actually working. And if you notice in places in our world where advocacy and activism happening, where it's not effective, it's not moving, you'll often see that at least one or more of these things is missing. Particularly the last 2, timely and kind. So like sometimes, and we can just think about it in the context of our families and our friends, sometimes we just know something's going wrong. They're saying something that's wrong. It's like deluded, it's rooted in ignorance. And we want to say something there and then. But is it timely to do that when someone else is already in a place of reactivity? And then is it kind? So again, just kind of adding that into the flavor of skillful speaking. And then skillful listening. This is a really powerful thing. And Geraldine, you were really leading and doing that with your partner here. One thing is it's really about staying present to what's happening, one of the shared agreements, right? So instead of being in our thoughts about it, instead of being in our projections about what's being shared, it's like, oh, I'm listening. Okay, I'm here. This is what you're saying. But then being present to the feelings being stirred up. So this is what I was sharing. Because often we're relational beings, we're social animals. So our nervous systems are built to feel. If we didn't feel, we'd be robots. And that's what's happening in a lot of our workplaces and communities. We're being told that we should be robots, but that's just numbing the part of us that makes us human, which is feeling. So skillful listening, again, this is a practice. It's not something we can do in one day, but it's really about learning to be present to ourselves first, to our own feelings and our own body sensations. And for us, as we think about, curiosity is what really leads to skillful communication. So for us at Bmore, there is a journey to advancing DEI and in breaking bias itself. And it's really, 10 competencies made up of 3 stages. Learn, which is about the left brain skills, awareness of what bias is, comprehension of why it exists, and then building optimism and curiosity. And curiosity really is the bridge to the next stage, which is develop. And in develop, we're actually practicing what we've learned. So I'll give you an example. I can tell you how to ride a bike, write a book about it, give you instructions on the physics of it, but you won't be able to ride a bike until you get on a bike and start pedaling, right? So that's what developing these skills, the stuff that we've learned, is about. And those requires competencies, starting with skillful communication, but then moving into well-being, which is, about our own wellness, collective identity, which is being able to relate with people across difference, and empathy and compassion, for self and for others. And that takes us to the Propel stage, which is about action. So this is where we're building competencies of empowerment, which is, again, feeling equipped to take action, and then moving into social cohesion, which is being able to collaborate with people across difference to take action. So that's kind of where this fits into the puzzle. But yeah, I'd love to just invite some, questions or insights from you all. I've shared quite a lot for another like 5 minutes or so before introducing some closing exercises. So any questions or thoughts or reflections around what I've shared so far? Or, what brought you here? Where are you still challenged or struggling? There are no right or wrong questions. You could also message me if you'd like. There are no questions about racial healing or skillful communication. That's great. I also understand that it's hard. It's hard to really respond to these things in the moment, particularly there's so much emotional baggage there, or feelings there, or body sensations there. And if that's the case for you, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's happening. Where is the discomfort or the comfort? Frank is saying, I feel very grateful right now. Oh, that's so great, Frank. What I would invite you to do, if you're willing, is really feel gratitude. Like begin to savor the gratitude and notice where in your body is gratitude. How does it feel? Like become a scientist of that experience. And this is actually really important. The neuroscience on this is pretty strong, is that as we begin to savor these positive emotions, in times of crisis, we have a muscle memory of those emotions. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Someone asked if we're going to post this anywhere and need it for a class. Yes, it'll be on our website under events. We have a YouTube channel, so that's why we're recording it so we can share it with more people. Nicola says, do you think racial healing is possible within big systems that exist, such as education? Yes, this is why we do the work we do. That's why Colleen and I are here. I certainly believe it's possible. But it requires, it's not for me to do, it's something that a lot of us have to believe in together. And that's our hope, right? So what we do is really bring this framework that is rooted in science, but it's also based in compassion to help people change habits and behaviors. So if you think about the education system, oftentimes it's rooted not in compassion, but in competition. It's rooted in kind of punishment and needing to fix or tell kids to be a certain way. I went through that system. Many of us have gone through that system. But there are changes that are taking place in many, many, many schools across the world, where it's really about uplifting the human spirit and really bringing them to a place of creativity and imagination. And that starts with each and every one of us. So that's our goal. We're slowly building that beloved community together. Johan asked, how can one help other people overcome the fear of making a mistake or saying something offensive? It's a great question. I think for me, it's by leading by example, right? So I think as human beings, we often think that we learn by reading or listening. Actually, the vast majority of learning that we do is non-sensory. It's through nonverbal communication that we really observe. Our senses are so vast, like the science is just beginning to scratch the surface on it. But that's why vulnerability, Brene Brown's work around this has gained so much traction, because when people actually share from a place of authenticity, it gives other people permission to do the same. And then the other thing I would say there is, of course, being vulnerable, but also not expecting people to change. So having that in the back of our minds that, it's not, everybody's on their own journey, so not forcing our own journey on them. So Anita, I have discomfort with things happen in the world, so I can really quiet my mind. Wonderful, Anita. And then thank you for those insights. And will you hide our names? So your names are not going to come up because it's going to be just me and the screen. So thank you for asking that, Geraldine. Wonderful. So let me actually, if there are no other questions, let me just share some a few other insights before I send you off in your way. Also, if there's any other questions, we'll stick around for a few minutes after our session together. So feel free to stay on and ask those questions and talk about it with us. So as next steps, coming out of this program, what we'd love for you to do is, of course, have you join our community, follow us on social, on, all the LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, and other places at Bmore with the New, so we can continue to be a part of this conversation and really grow this new way of thinking into the world. The second is really registering for our kind of Bmore DEI challenge. If you haven't done it, it's a free 4-day challenge where we go deeper into those 10 competencies and how to really do this work effectively. And you could do that by going to bmorewiththenew.com/challenge. And then you could also take or gift one of our courses called Breaking Bias with Mindfulness, to yourself or anyone else. It's a 7-day meditation course on learning the mindfulness and compassion tools to heal the wounds of bias. So again, all this information is on our website. We'll send you a follow-up email with some exclusive codes and discounts. So definitely try to check that out. And Colleen is also sharing it here. Some best practices after this session are, really taking 15 to 30 minutes for recovery. Some of this stuff may have been very new for you. It might have opened up some things that you were holding for you. So really being very gentle with yourself. You could get embodied, stretch, breathe, go for a walk, drink some water. And again, if you have any other questions, we'll stick around after this. So I want to just end by this proverb that I mentioned earlier today. There's a reason why God, or if you don't believe in that, nature, evolution, gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So in skillful communication and skillful speaking and listening, that part of 2 ears listening is so crucial. And in fact, to do that effectively is really about listening to our bodies, really beginning there, listening to how we feel. And this, the signals our bodies are sending us in the world we're in. So with that, I'd love to just have you all share one last thing in the chat, which is, one commitment to cultivating skillful communication moving forward. So I'd love to just read those off. So please do share in the chat. And then I know that we're almost at time, so I want to just thank you all for coming. Remembering to breathe, says Johan. Commitment is, as you move forward, what is an intention you'd like to set for yourself moving forward around skillful communication? Working on building a practice of mindfulness as a piece of communication, sharing that knowledge with others, that's beautiful. To practice being present, stop and listen. Listen to understand and not to judge. Oh, that's powerful. We can have a whole different session on that. Active listening without getting distracted. I'm going to practice listening before I speak, to be more aware and understand my emotions as key. And then Johan said, releasing the need to prove. KG shared, I commit to focusing more on what I have control over, thoughts, emotions, words, and actions. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful end of the year, holiday season, if you celebrate. It's been such an honor for us to do this work this year. And we look forward to seeing you again next month at one of our community events or in one of our courses. So take good care, happy holidays. And, we'll stick around if you want to ask any other questions. Thank you. Take good care. Bye, everyone. Do you all have any questions? Let me stop the call.